Okay, let's continue our reading. Again, we're reading Gods of the Bible. We just completed where Yahweh speaks of himself in the scriptures. Now we're going to start on page 145, Joshua's choice. If Moses was not a monotheist, what can we say about his successor, Joshua? We can find an answer to this question in the book of Joshua 24. Joshua calls all the tribes of Israel together, assembles them in the region of Shechem, and summons the elders, the chiefs, the judges, and the officials before the Elohim. Before the assembled congregation, Joshua summarizes what has happened since the calling of Abraham up to his days: the arrival in Canaan, the emergence of the descendants through Isaac and Jacob, the captivity in Egypt, the deliverance, the first victorious battles against the nations that tried to prevent the passage of the Israelites, the crossing of the Jordan, the conquest of the city of Jericho, and the first territories of the so-called Promised Land. After Joshua has finished enumerating all the achievements attained with the help of Yahweh, he turns to the people and say, "Now fear Yahweh and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the Elohim your ancestors worshipped before the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve Yahweh." That's Joshua 24:14. Again, guys, I've read this particular scripture many times, but it never clicked into my head. Well, it kind of clicked, but I just kind of glossed over it because we were told that Elohim was one and there was no other gods. But it's clear as day. I'm going to read this again. "Now fear Yahweh and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the Elohim your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve Yahweh." We learn here that the patriarchs originally served the other Elohim in Mesopotamia, beyond the Euphrates River, their homeland, and during the centuries spent in Egypt. Joshua then, with a statement that would surely astonish a convinced monotheist, he says, "If it is difficult for you to serve Yahweh," and then the Hebrew words with the English underneath it, it says, "Choose for you today who you serve. If the Elohim that served fathers your, that in part of the river, or if otherwise, the Elohim of the Amorites." So it sounds like he's giving them a choice. He's pleading Yahweh's case. He says, Yahweh did all this wonderful stuff for us, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this. However, you need to make a choice. Are you going to serve Yahweh, or are you going to serve the Elohim of your forefathers? They were given a choice. Again, Hebrew to English, that you inhabit in land there. So we can learn that there were many different options, many gods to rely on. The Elohim whom the fathers had served in Mesopotamia and who continued to rule over those people. The Elohim of the area where the Hebrews had begun to dwell after the conquest of Canaan. And finally, the Elohim named Yahweh. After Joshua presents the three options and explains to the people the need for a decision, he tells them what decision he has already made. Again, this is Hebrew to English. "I and my whole household, we will serve Yahweh." Wow. And that evokes so much. It's a trigger for me because that was drilled into our head, posted in our home. Let's see. "As for me and my household, we will serve Jehovah." Jehovah, Yahweh, one of these little Elohims. Joshua and his family chose Yahweh. Now it is the people's turn. That this is not a purely rhetorical device becomes evident in the following verses. When the people affirm that they want to follow Yahweh, Joshua points out the consequences and responsibilities of his choice, saying, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve Yahweh." That's Joshua 24:22. The people confirm their choice. They express their commitment to Yahweh and promise to serve him. Joshua said, "Then throw away the foreign Elohim that are among you, and yield your hearts to Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel." And the people said to Joshua, "We will serve Yahweh, our Elohim, and obey him." That's Joshua 24:23 and 24. Verses 25 and 26 enumerate the sequence of actions that generally followed the formalization of an alliance, the conclusion of a covenant between a lord and his subjects. It is an interesting passage to read. On that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shittim, he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak near the holy place of Yahweh. That's Joshua 24:25 and 26. This was not the first time the Israelites had chosen Yahweh. Abraham had responded positively to the proposal to leave his land and move to Canaan. The people had decided to follow Moses, who promised to lead them out of Egypt with the help of this Elohim. During the desert wanderings, the people had again agreed to serve this Elohim after abandoning him and questioning his ability to keep his promises. The alternation of acceptance and abandonment, loyalty and betrayal, the decisions withdrawn and then reaffirmed, testifies to the fact that Moses, Joshua, and the entire population were aware of the possibility of changing sides at any time. The Elohim to whom one could turn to offer one's service in exchange for help and protection were numerous. We must also not forget a theme presented with disarming clarity in the Bible. These choices were motivated by convenience alone. Spiritual needs were not taken into consideration. People chose the Elohim who seemed to offer more guarantees at a specific moment. Monotheism had no home in this world. This attitude will remain constant in the history of the ancient people of Israel, requiring endless interventions on Yahweh's part. Prophetic literature represents the strong and desperate voice, a constant reminder to respect the pact of alliance made with this particular Elohim, Yahweh. Before the religious reform of King Joshua, 648 to 609 BCE, Yahweh was not only not unique, but also far from being exclusive. Cults dedicated to Anat, Tammuz, and Asherah were widespread. In the chapter on the miracle of Elijah, we will discuss the worship of Baal, the ruler of the northern territories. Under King Hezekiah, 715 to 607 BCE, these so-called pagan cults were abolished, but quickly reintroduced by his successor Manasseh in 687 to 642 BCE. He erected altars to Baal, and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. He bowed down to the whole army of the skies and worshiped them. Wow. He bowed down to the whole army of the skies and worshiped them. He built altars in the temple of Yahweh. 2 Kings 21, 3 and 4. The army of the skies was also known to the prophet Isaiah, who clearly distinguishes it from earthly kingdoms when he recalls, "On that day, Yahweh will punish the army of the high on high, and the kingdoms of the earth on earth." Isaiah 24:21. Each army, kingdom is punished in its own location, so to speak. Those in the high, on high, and those on the earth, on earth. Similarly, King Manasseh worshipped the whole army of the skies. Monotheism was not even a viable option. Perhaps the future will allow us to accept this statement with some serenity. Okay, the next subtopic is the name of Yahweh. Having established that Yahweh was one of many, let us examine the name by which this Elohim told Moses that he wished to be called YHWH. Scholars voraciously describe this name as the name of excellence, the great name, the only name, the glorious and terrible name, the hidden and the mysterious name, etc. Moses acts as an intermediary between Yahweh and the people. Since he does not consider Yahweh to be God in the modern religious sense, he needs to know his identity, as seen above, before acting as his spokesman. Moses needs to know his name so that he, in turn, can communicate it to those who are to follow him. To this request, the Elohim responds, Exodus 3:14, and this is Hebrew to English, Etyeh, Asher, Etyeh, and then adds, "You shall say to the children of Israel, Etyeh has sent me to you." The Elohim further clarifies this identification by introducing the famous tetragrammaton, YHWH, of which Yahweh is the tentative and later vocalization. Hebrew to English, YHWH, Elohim, Fathers, Yor. We must therefore think his name consists of the four letters YHWH, even though they are closely related to the previous definition that reads Ehe, Asher, Ehe, to which we will return. It was currently not the first time Yahweh introduced himself by this name. He had to have done so before, since the antediluvian patriarchs knew the tetragrammaton YHWH, according to Genesis 4:26, at the time of Enosh, Adam's grandson. Hebrew to English translation, they began to invoke in within name of Yahweh. We then ask ourselves, did Adam, Eve, Cain, and Seth, father of Enosh, not invoke Yahweh? Provided that they knew him, they did not address him. Let me say this again. Provided that they knew him, did they not address him in any way? Did they call upon him differently? Did they not know his name? We have no answers. So all we can do is take note of the strangeness of such a preemptory statement. Only from that, at the time of Enosh, did they begin to call upon Yahweh. Also, we cannot but wonder in what language this word YHWH was pronounced. For it is evident that the Hebrew language did not exist at the time of Adam, his sons and grandsons, nor should we believe that the situation changed in the time of Moses. So we ask ourselves, what language did Moses and the people who followed him out of Egypt speak? The families these people belonged to had been living in Egypt for centuries. What language could they speak, if not some form of Egyptian? At best, they could speak a variant of Amorite, widely spoken at the time, or Aramaic, which was gradually gaining acceptance. But everything points Egyptian. At any rate, the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, was written in the Bible several centuries after its pronunciation, and only indicated the consonants of a language that did not exist when the name was first spoken. Is the name YHWH an originally Hebrew intervention, or is it a later product of the monotheistic imagination of the Jerusalem priestly class? We can confidently answer both of these questions in the negative. Knowledge of the Tetragrammaton, regardless of its explicit formulation before Moses, is attested in extra-biblical sources. In the ancient area corresponding to modern Lebanon and Syria, a civilization known as Ugarit had developed before the appearance of the Hebrews in Palestine. Its main urban center, named after the city of Ergarit, was located in what is now Ras Shamra on the Mediterranean Sea. The ostrakas, or ceramic bowls containing auspicious signs. In some of these archaeological findings of Ugaritic origin, travelers on their way south are addressed with the words, "May Yahweh of Tinman and his Asherah accompany you." There are two surprising clues in these seemingly trivial inscriptions. First, we learn that Ugaritic culture knew Yahweh as Lord of Tinman, or Taman, a term used in the Semitic language for south. Israel and region of Sinai actually lie south of Lebanon and Syria. So we are in the area where Moses met his Elohim, and the travelers who went there were under the protection of this Lord who ruled there. It is also said that Yahweh had an Asherah, a consort. The existence of a female companion is also attested elsewhere, but not only by the numerous statuettes representing a female deity found in almost all palaces of Palestine where archaeological excavations have been carried out. Significant material in this regard was found in a place between the Negev and the Sinai. Kuntilet Ajrud. It was a sanctuary still active between the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, inhabited by the Israelites who performed a prophetic function, invocations to Yahweh, and his Pereda, known as Asherah, were found there. The Egyptian Hebrews residing in Elephantine, Egypt, had no difficulty addressing Yahweh and his consort, Anat Yahu, even in the 5th century BCE. Several of these situations, both geographically and historically distributed, coincide with the figures and actions of the Anunnaki, governors who had divided their territories over which they ruled with their respective companions. Archaeology and paleography have also enabled us to verify that the name Yahweh was present in the territory to the south of Palestine, the Negev, and Sinai, as far back as the 3rd and 2nd millennia BCE in the forms Jah, Yah, Jal, Yal, Jahu, Yahu, Jah, and Yah. Also belonging to the Ungatric cultures is a fragment of the Baal cycle in which it is written, "My son's name is Yao." Garbini, Storia e Etiology. I think that's where it's taken from. Inscriptions with the tetragrammaton of Yahweh, YHWH, and the script Yah Rod, meaning descent, are also attributed to these millennia, long before Moses and the Exodus of the Hebrews. The Amorite epigraphy of Mari, Mesopotamia, dating from around the 18th century BCE, presents numerous records of names composed with Yahweh or Yahweh, or even simply Yah. Inscriptions of the Tetragrammaton of Yahweh, YHWH, and the script Yarad, meaning descent, are also attributed to these millennia long before Moses and the Exodus of the Hebrews. The Amorite epigraphy of Mari, Mesopotamia, dating from around the 18th century BCE, presents numerous records of names composed with Yahweh or Yahweh or simply even Yah. I think I just read that, didn't I? I'm going to keep reading. The presence of the devotion to this local ruler is also documented in later centuries when Porphyro, a Phoenician historian from the 3rd century CE, writes that a god named Liu was worshipped in Beirut. Therefore, we are dealing with a cult present in that territory since at least the beginning of the 2nd millennia BCE, which was followed by nomadic and sedentary populations. Its vocalization also poses significant problems. Without going into the technical merits of the physiological analysis, we shall report what pertains to the various interpretations that everyone is familiar with. Is YHWH to be pronounced Yahweh or Jehovah? Jehovah is formed using the vowels of the word Adonai, meaning Lord, giving the absolute prohibition of pronouncing the name God when the Tetragrammaton vocalizes with O and an A occurs throughout the biblical text. It should be read Adonai. When it is already preceded by Adonai, it takes the vowels of the word Elohim and then becomes Jawil, Diana et al. It must be said, however, that in the Masoretic Bible itself, the Tetragrammaton is vocalized as Yehovah hundreds of times. The subject is complex. For many decades, indeed for centuries, there has been debate over the possible meaning of the term Yahweh and the phrase with which Yahweh introduces himself to Moses. Eye, Asher, Eye. Scholars of various backgrounds have provided interpretations based on the careful and surgical exegesis of the Tetragrammaton. It is not an easy matter because this expression has no comparison through the Old Testament. To make sense of this riddle, we propose to change the perspective. Wow. Okay, I'm going to stop here. This is fascinating, and I know that this is going to ruffle so many feathers, and I know I'm probably going to get lots of feedback, negative feedback of, why am I doing this? And again, seeking the truth, guys. Seeking the truth. And if you're like me, from childhood, we've had these questions deep in our core that something is just not quite right with this God. And I remember as a young person thinking that something was wrong with this God. I didn't have any warm, fuzzy feelings for this God. I thought he was mean spirited. I thought he's jealous and he can't make up his mind. He created man in his image. Perfect. Perfect in his image. However, they sinned and messed up so bad that he had to kick him out the garden and say that, man, I wish I'd never made them. That does not sound like the creator of the cosmos. And Yeshua said that his father was light. There was no darkness in his father at all. Is killing folks darkness? Is demanding worship loving? Is asking you to sacrifice your firstborn child, and just about when you're ready to plunge the knife into the chest of your firstborn child, then he says, oh, my bad, I just wanted to see if you would do it. Does that sound like a loving God? And what is the purpose of the blood sacrifices that Yahweh, Jehovah, required? Kill the sheep, kill the fat bull, pour out the blood, give me all the fatty parts. Why did Jehovah, Yahweh, want the fatty parts too? Critical thinking, guys. Critical thinking. Go back and take a look. You know, my spirituality is the most important thing to me. And if I'm going to be serving a God, any God, if I have these questions about serving this God, I think I have every right to check it out for myself to see if I truly want to serve this God or not. And if I choose not to serve this God, is he going to kill me? Probably, if it's Yahweh and Jehovah, for sure, because it's not the grand creator of the cosmos. Anyway, we're going to head and stop right here, guys. And we're going to start on page 152, Making Sense of Foreign Names. So I'll see you guys next time.